Discovered my parents were arranging for my estranged sister to show up unannounced at my wedding to force us back together. When I objected, they said I was selfish and this was bigger than my day. So I disinvited them completely. Hello everyone. My name is Olivia. I'm 31 years old. And today I'm going to tell you about how I discovered my own parents were planning to sabotage my wedding by orchestrating a surprise appearance from my estranged sister to force a reconciliation that I explicitly did not want. This is a story about boundaries being trampled, about family members who prioritize their own emotional needs over respecting your choices, and about making the difficult decision to uninvite your own parents from your wedding when they refuse to respect your most important day. I never imagined I would get married without my parents present. But sometimes protecting your peace and your boundaries matters more than maintaining the appearance of family harmony. Let me start by explaining my relationship with my sister Victoria and why we're estranged, because that context is crucial to understanding why my parents' planned ambush was so devastating and unacceptable. Victoria is 3 years older than me, currently 34, and we have been estranged for the past 5 years. Our relationship was always complicated, marked by rivalry and resentment that I now recognize was fostered by our parents' tendency to compare us constantly. But the final breaking point came 5 years ago when Victoria deliberately sabotaged my career by spreading lies to my employer. That got me fired from a job I loved. I had been working as a marketing coordinator at a growing startup, and I was up for a promotion to marketing director. Victoria, who worked in the same industry at a competing company, was apparently threatened by my success. She contacted my boss under the guise of being a concerned family member and told him that I had been stealing company secrets to sell to competitors, that I had substance abuse problems affecting my work, and that I had been falsifying reports to make my performance look better than it actually was. None of these things were true, but Victoria was convincing enough and had just enough surface knowledge of my work to make her lies sound plausible. My employer launched an investigation, and while I was eventually cleared of all accusations because there was no evidence to support Victoria's claims, the damage was done. The trust between me and my employer was broken, the promotion went to someone else, and the work environment became so uncomfortable that I ended up resigning. It took me 6 months to find a new job, during which I struggled financially and emotionally. When I confronted Victoria about what she had done, she admitted it with shocking casualness, saying that she did it because she felt I was always the favorite child and she wanted to bring me down a peg. She showed no remorse, no understanding of how deeply she had hurt me or how her actions had impacted my life. I cut Victoria out of my life completely after that. I blocked her on all platforms, refused to attend family events where she would be present, and made it clear to my parents that I was done trying to have a relationship with someone who had actively tried to destroy my career and showed no remorse for it. My parents were upset about my decision, constantly pressuring me to forgive Victoria, to understand that siblings fight and I should let it go, that family is more important than holding grudges. But what Victoria did wasn't a sibling fight. It was calculated sabotage that had real consequences for my life. And I had no interest in maintaining a relationship with someone capable of that level of betrayal. Fast forward to 2 years ago when I met my fiancé, now husband, Alex. Alex is wonderful, supportive, kind. Everything I could have hoped for in a partner. He knows the full story about Victoria and has been completely supportive of my decision to remain estranged from her. When Alex proposed last year, I was overjoyed and immediately began planning our wedding. From the very beginning, I made it crystal clear to everyone, especially my parents, that Victoria would not be invited to the wedding. This was non-negotiable. I was not going to have someone who betrayed me so fundamentally at one of the most important celebrations of my life. My parents pushed back on this decision repeatedly during the engagement period. They would bring up Victoria constantly, talking about how sad it was that our family was broken. How Victoria regretted what she did even though she had never actually apologized to me. How a wedding was the perfect opportunity to heal our relationship and bring the family back together. I shut down these conversations every time, reiterating that my wedding was about celebrating my marriage to Alex, not about serving as free family therapy or forced reconciliation. I told them that if they couldn't respect my decision about the guest list, they would be putting their own attendance at risk. My parents seemed to accept my boundary, or at least they stopped openly arguing with me about it. They helped with wedding planning. My mother went dress shopping with me. My father walked me through the budget and offered to contribute financially. I thought we had reached an understanding, that they had finally respected my decision even if they didn't like it. I was wrong. They had simply decided to go behind my back and do what they wanted anyway, regardless of my explicit wishes. The discovery of their plan happened completely by accident 3 weeks before my wedding. I had stopped by my parents' house unexpectedly to drop off some wedding programs that had been delivered to their address by mistake. I let myself in with my key, calling out to let them know I was there, but they didn't hear me because they were in the kitchen having what they clearly thought was a private conversation. I heard my mother's voice first, saying something about coordinating with Victoria about what time to arrive at the venue. My stomach immediately dropped because there was no legitimate reason for my mother to be coordinating anything with Victoria related to my wedding. I stood in the hallway, frozen, and listened as my parents discussed their plan in detail. They'd been in secret contact with Victoria for months, planning what they called a surprise reconciliation at my wedding. The plan was for Victoria to show up during the cocktail hour, after the ceremony but before dinner, making a dramatic entrance to surprise me. My parents had apparently convinced themselves that once Victoria and I were face to face at my own wedding, surrounded by family and in the emotional atmosphere of the celebration, I would be unable to make a scene and would be forced to accept her presence. They thought that this forced proximity would lead to reconciliation, that the joy of my wedding day would override my legitimate anger about what Victoria had done, and that I would thank them later for orchestrating this reunion. As I listened to them plan this ambush, discussing logistics and timing like they were planning a surprise party rather than a massive violation of my boundaries, I felt a range of emotions: betrayal, rage, disbelief, and a deep sadness that my own parents would do this to me. They were talking about my wedding like it was their event, their opportunity to fix what they saw as a broken family, with no consideration for what I wanted or how I would feel about being ambushed on what was supposed to be one of the happiest days of my life. I walked into the kitchen and confronted them immediately. The look on their faces when they saw me standing there was almost comical, a mixture of shock and guilt, but it quickly morphed into defensiveness. I demanded to know what they were thinking, how they could possibly believe that surprising me with Victoria at my wedding was acceptable after I had explicitly and repeatedly said she was not welcome. My mother immediately started crying, saying that they were just trying to heal the family, that they couldn't stand the idea of their daughters being estranged forever, that they thought my wedding was the perfect opportunity to bring us back together. My father took a different approach, getting angry and accusatory. He said I was being selfish and stubborn, that I had held this grudge against Victoria for long enough, that it was time to forgive and move on. He said that my wedding wasn't just about me and Alex, that it was a family event that affected everyone, and that Victoria had every right to be there as my sister. He actually said the words, "This is bigger than just you and your feelings," as if my own wedding day wasn't supposed to be primarily about me and my feelings. He said that as my parents, they had the right to invite who they wanted to the wedding, especially when they were contributing financially. I was absolutely livid. I told them that my wedding was absolutely about me and Alex, that we were the ones getting married and we had complete authority over who was invited. I reminded them that Victoria had never apologized for sabotaging my career, that she had shown no remorse, and I had every right to maintain my boundary of not having her in my life. I said that their plan to ambush me with her presence was a massive betrayal of my trust and a complete disrespect of my clearly stated wishes. I told them that if they couldn't respect my boundaries about my own wedding, then they had forfeited their right to attend. My mother begged me to reconsider, saying I was overreacting, that they were just trying to help, that I would regret not having my sister at my wedding. My father continued to be angry, saying I was being dramatic and that if I uninvited them over this, I would be the one tearing the family apart, not Victoria, who had actually done something wrong. The conversation went in circles, with them refusing to understand why their plan was so wrong and me becoming increasingly firm that I would not tolerate this violation of my boundaries. I finally told them point blank, if they wanted to attend my wedding, they needed to promise immediately that Victoria would not be there, that they would cancel whatever arrangements they had made with her, and that they would respect my decision about my own guest list. I said that if they couldn't make that promise, they were uninvited and I would hire security to ensure Victoria didn't get into the venue. My father refused to promise, saying he wasn't going to be given ultimatums about his own daughter's wedding. My mother tried to hedge, saying maybe we could all sit down and talk about it, find some compromise. There was no compromise to be found. Either Victoria was not at my wedding, which was my clear and reasonable boundary, or my parents were choosing to violate that boundary and would face the consequence of not being there themselves. I gave them 24 hours to decide whether they were willing to respect my wishes and stay invited, or whether they would prioritize their reconciliation fantasy over attending their daughter's wedding. I left their house with the wedding program still in my hands, my mind reeling from what I had just discovered and confronted. Over the next 24 hours, my parents called and texted repeatedly, but not to give me the answer I had asked for. Instead, they continued to argue with me, to try to convince me I was being unreasonable. To make me feel guilty for keeping the family broken, my mother sent long emotional messages about how much it would hurt her to miss my wedding, how I was forcing her to choose between her daughters, how this was also unfair. My father sent shorter, angrier messages about how I was being a Britazilla and making my wedding into a power trip. How I was showing my true selfish colors, how disappointed he was in me. Neither of them would simply promise that Victoria wouldn't be there. They kept trying to negotiate, to find ways around my boundary, suggesting that maybe Victoria could come to the ceremony but not the reception, or that she could attend but stay away from me, or that they could invite her but not tell me so I wouldn't worry about it beforehand. Every suggestion made it clearer that they had no intention of actually respecting my wishes. They just wanted to find a way to get what they wanted while making me feel like I had some input. After 24 hours, when I still didn't have a clear promise from them that they would respect my boundary, I made the hardest decision of my life. I called them and told them they were uninvited from my wedding. I explained that their inability to respect my clearly stated wishes about my own wedding, their insistence on prioritizing their desire for forced reconciliation over my right to have a day free from someone who betrayed me, and their continued attempts to manipulate and guilt me into accepting Victoria's presence had made it impossible for me to trust them. I said that I couldn't have them at my wedding knowing they might still try to bring Victoria anyway, or knowing that they would spend the whole event upset and resentful that their plan had been foiled. My mother screamed at me through the phone, saying I was making the biggest mistake of my life, that I would regret this forever, that no daughter should get married without her parents present. My father told me I was dead to him, that if I was going to choose my stubbornness over my family, I shouldn't consider them my parents anymore. Their reactions, harsh and manipulative, actually confirmed that I was making the right decision. These were not people who had my best interests at heart or who respected me as an adult capable of making my own decisions. The fallout from uninviting my parents was significant. Extended family members heard about the situation and opinions were divided. Some relatives understood my position, especially those who knew the full story about what Victoria had done and who had watched my parents pressure me about reconciliation for years. They supported my decision to protect my boundaries and my wedding day. Other relatives, particularly those who only heard my parents' version of events where I was the unreasonable daughter who uninvited her parents over wanting to invite her sister, were horrified and refused to attend my wedding in solidarity with my parents. My parents launched a campaign to paint themselves as the victims and me as the villain. They told everyone who would listen that I had uninvited them over a minor disagreement, that I was holding a grudge against Victoria for something that happened years ago, that I was ruining the family over my own selfishness and pride. They conveniently left out the part where they had planned to ambush me with Victoria's presence against my explicit wishes, or the part where they refused to simply promise to respect my boundary. In their version, they were heartbroken parents being excluded from their daughter's wedding for no good reason. Alex was completely supportive of my decision. He had witnessed firsthand how my parents had pressured me about Victoria, and he understood that allowing them to attend after discovering their planned betrayal would have meant spending our entire wedding day anxious and watching for Victoria to appear. He helped me deal with the practical aspects of uninviting them, including hiring security for the venue with photos of both my parents and Victoria with instructions not to let them enter. We also informed our wedding planner and key members of the wedding party about the situation, so everyone could help keep watch for any attempted crash. The 3 weeks between uninviting my parents and the wedding were incredibly stressful. My parents continued to reach out, alternating between begging me to reconsider and attacking me for my decision. They tried to recruit other family members to intervene on their behalf. My mother even showed up at my apartment once, crying and begging to be let back into the wedding, but still refusing to promise that Victoria wouldn't be there. I had to be firm, repeating that my decision was final, and that their continued harassment was only proving that I had made the right choice. There was also the emotional toll of preparing for my wedding without my parents' involvement. My mother had been helping with final preparations, and suddenly I had to handle everything alone or with the help of friends. There were moments when I felt sad about them not being there, when I imagined walking down the aisle without my father or getting ready for the wedding without my mother, and the grief was real even though I knew I was making the right decision. I had to mourn the parents I wished I had, the ones who would have respected my boundaries and prioritized my happiness. While dealing with the reality of the parents I actually had, my wedding day arrived, and despite everything, it was beautiful. I walked down the aisle escorted by my best friend who had been like a sister to me through all of this. Alex's parents, who had been supportive and respectful throughout our engagement, filled some of the parent roles with grace and kindness. The security we hired kept watch throughout the event, and while my parents and Victoria apparently did try to show up at the venue, they were turned away before they could disrupt anything. I didn't even know about their attempt until days later because security handled it so discreetly. The wedding itself was everything I had hoped for, filled with people who actually loved and respected me, who celebrated my marriage without trying to use the occasion to push their own agendas. There was a lightness to the day precisely because I didn't have the anxiety of waiting for Victoria to appear or watching my parents' disappointed faces as they resented my decision. I was able to be fully present, to enjoy every moment, to celebrate with Alex surrounded by our genuine support system. In retrospect, as hard as the decision was, having a wedding free from people who had proven they wouldn't respect my boundaries was a gift after the wedding. And why parents continued their campaign of guilt and manipulation for a few months. They sent messages about how hurt they were to have missed their daughter's wedding, how I had deprived them of important memories, how I needed to apologize for excluding them. They never acknowledged their role in the situation, never apologized for planning to ambush me with Victoria, never took responsibility for prioritizing their desires over my clearly stated boundaries. Eventually, their messages became less frequent as they realized I wasn't going to back down or apologize for protecting my own wedding day. It's been 8 months since my wedding now, and I have no regrets about uninviting my parents. None. Was it painful? Absolutely. Do I wish things could have been different? Of course. But I also know that allowing them to attend after discovering their plan would have been worse. I would have spent my entire wedding day anxious and watching for Victoria, unable to fully enjoy the celebration. I would have felt violated and disrespected in my own space on my most important day. And I would have taught my parents that they could violate my boundaries without real consequences, setting a precedent for my entire marriage. My relationship with my parents remains estranged. They occasionally reach out with messages that range from guilt-tripping to angry to occasionally seemingly remorseful, but they have never actually apologized for what they did or acknowledged why it was wrong. They still maintain that they were trying to help, that they were doing what any loving parents would do to heal their family, that I overreacted to their good intentions. Until they can understand that good intentions don't excuse violating someone's boundaries. Especially regarding their own wedding, I don't see how we can rebuild a relationship. Interestingly, I've received multiple messages from relatives who attended the wedding saying it was one of the most joyful and peaceful weddings they'd ever attended. Several mentioned that they could feel the genuine love and celebration in the room, the absence of underlying tension that often exists at family events. While they didn't say it directly, I think they were acknowledging that the event was better without the drama my parents would have brought, either through their resentment at not getting their reconciliation or through Victoria's presence if their plan had succeeded. Alex and I are building our life together, setting healthy boundaries with both of our families, and creating our own traditions and family culture based on mutual respect and actual love rather than obligation and manipulation. We're planning to have children in the next few years, and I've already decided that my parents will not have access to my children until and unless they can demonstrate real understanding of boundaries and respect. I won't subject my future kids to the same dynamics I grew up with, where one child's harmful behavior is excused and the other child is pressured to accept mistreatment for the sake of family peace. Some people have told me I was too harsh. That parents sometimes make mistakes and I should give them another chance. That family is important and I'll regret losing this relationship. But here's what those people don't understand. My parents didn't make a mistake. They made a calculated decision to violate my boundaries, to prioritize their desires over my wishes regarding my own wedding, and to try to manipulate me into accepting something I had explicitly said was unacceptable. When I caught them and confronted them, they didn't apologize or back down. They doubled down, called me selfish, and tried to make me feel guilty for enforcing my own boundaries. That's not a mistake, that's a pattern of disrespect that I have every right to protect myself from. I also want to address the idea that because they're my parents, they're entitled to be at my wedding regardless of their behavior. This is a toxic belief that needs to end. Being a parent doesn't give you unlimited rights over your adult child's life and decisions. Being a parent doesn't mean you can violate boundaries without consequences. Being a parent doesn't mean your child owes you access to their important life events when you've proven you won't respect their wishes about those events. My parents' behavior showed they couldn't be trusted to attend my wedding without causing problems, so they lost the privilege of attending. That's not me being cruel, that's me enforcing natural consequences for their actions. My advice to anyone facing a similar situation, where family members are trying to manipulate or control your wedding, is to prioritize your own peace and boundaries over family expectations. Your wedding is one day in your life where you should get to be surrounded by people who love and support you without conditions. If family members are threatening to use that day to push their own agendas, whether it's forcing reconciliation with estranged relatives, making dramatic scenes, or otherwise inserting their priorities over yours, you have every right to uninvite them. It will be hard. People will judge you. You may lose some relationships, but you will have protected one of the most important days of your life from being hijacked by people who don't respect you. You also don't owe anyone a wedding invitation just because they're family or because they're contributing financially. If accepting money comes with strings attached that violate your boundaries, give the money back and plan a wedding you can afford without it. If family members think their biological relationship to you entitles them to override your decisions about your own wedding, they have fundamentally misunderstood what family should be. True family respects you, supports your decisions even when they don't personally agree with them, and prioritizes your happiness especially on your important days. My name is Olivia. I'm 31 years old. And this is my story of how I discovered my parents were planning to ambush my wedding with my estranged sister to force a reconciliation, and how I made the difficult but necessary decision to uninvite them to protect my wedding day and my boundaries. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done, and it came with significant costs in terms of family relationships and social judgment. But 8 months later, married to an amazing man and building a life based on mutual respect and healthy boundaries, I have absolutely no regrets. My wedding day was peaceful, joyful, and free from the drama and manipulation my parents would have brought. That's worth more than any traditional family photos or maintaining relationships with people who don't actually respect me. Thank you for listening to my story.